Hi guys, hope you're all well. I've been away for a week at a defence show, back now, so I've got a couple of videos to put out, and this one is going to be on air guns in the UK. Is your air gun going to cause you any legal problems? Are you going to end up in prison because of your air gun? And also, are you going to have any issues with your firearms license because of things to do with your air guns? The first thing to get out of the way is the fact that there are power limits on air guns in the UK. An air pistol has to be below 6 foot per pound at the muzzle, and that power limit is defined by the weight of your projectile, so your pellet and how much that weighs, the mass, and then the velocity that it's able to travel at. So there's a calculation to be done between those two factors, and that will give you the energy that it can produce, and it's that energy that is limited in the UK. So if you were to look at a pistol, you would want to be sub 6 foot per pound at the muzzle. And if you were to look at a rifle, it would need to be sub 12 foot per pound at the muzzle. And this is where some people can get into problems. So the usual problem people would get is that they want, obviously, as much velocity, as much energy as possible for things like vermin control. If you have a higher velocity, your rifle is going to shoot flatter, or your pistol is going to shoot flatter, so you're not going to have so much ranging error. So there are definitely performance benefits to a higher velocity. You're going to have less windage error as well, and for that reason, people are quite keen to tune their rifles and pistols so they're maximizing the velocity out of them. That comes with possible legal ramifications. Because let's say you're running, a certain pellet, your favorite pellet that you know is quite accurate in your rifle, and then you send it away to someone to tune that rifle, and you say to them, I want you to tune it right up to the 12 foot per pound limit. Or if you do it yourself and you test some pellets, through a chrono to get the velocity out of them, and you tune that rifle so that it's delivering exactly 12 foot per pound, and you think, great, I'm within the law. You're probably not within the law, because the problem is, if the police were to take that rifle away and test it, and they have done this, they've gone round to people's houses and taken their rifles from them. Let's say they're coming round your house for something, completely different, and they happen to notice you have an air rifle. It's entirely possible they could take that away for testing. If you've got a firearms license and they come round to do a random inspection, it's entirely possible that they will take your air rifle and test it. And there's not much you can do about that. They can test it if they feel that it might be over the limit. If you've ordered some parts from eBay, or you've ordered some parts from China to tune your air rifle and to change the power limits of it, then the police may investigate that if Border Force alert them. And that has happened to people as well. They've bought kits, uprated spring kits and things like that. Border Force have maybe alerted the police. They've allowed these kits to arrive, and a couple of weeks later they've gone round to someone's house, and then they've taken that rifle or pistol away to test it. Now, they will test it with a variety of different pellets, including some very, very heavy pellets that you may not have used before. And depending on some of those pellets, you might find that some of them produce an energy limit that's above the legal requirement. If that happens, you're in massive trouble, because it's no good you saying, oh, but with the pellets I use, it was fine. They don't care about that. All they care about is that it could be used with X pellet, and that could generate an energy limit that's over and above what is allowed. They won't be lenient with you. There's no kind of leniency in terms of like legal ignorance. There's no point you saying, oh, I didn't realize you were going to test different pellets. That won't help you at all. So you need to be aware of this. That is why if you send these air guns off to a professional for them to tune them, what they will probably do is tune them for consistency. So one of the most important things to make these things accurate is to make sure you're getting consistent velocities. So they'll probably fit a regulator, and that will give you more consistency on velocity, because it's basically controlling exactly how much air is released every single time, especially in the pre-charged pneumatics, that they can be a bit different in that if they're not regulated, they'll give more air at the beginning of the charge when the cylinder's really full up, and that will slowly work its way down. There'll be a sweet spot somewhere in the middle. If you regulate that, you should get a much bigger sweet spot there. So that's a good way to keep things consistent. But they will down tune it, so they will probably aim for around 11 foot-pounds of energy, somewhere around that, so that there's no risk, whatever pellet you put in there, that you're going to, step over the legal limit. And it isn't necessarily so that the heaviest pellet is going to be the worst case scenario. There will be some tipping point, because as you go heavier, the velocity will go lower. There's only so much energy that gun can put out. And as you go heavier, the air won't be able to move that pellet so fast. So the velocities will start to deteriorate. But somewhere in the middle between the very lightest pellet and the very heaviest pellet, there will be one that is very well suited. It might have a specifically good gas seal around it, and all things sort of come together for that specific pellet, and it happens to generate a higher velocity with just the right mass, and it could tip you over. So it's not even necessarily the heavier pellets you've got to worry about. And then there comes to the point, obviously, where people are purposely tuning or doing something temporary to their air gun to make it go over the legal limit on purpose. That's not a sensible thing to do at all. Some of the things that people are doing are actually dangerous to the gun itself. It's going to have an impact on the gun's ability to work anymore. I know that some people would do what's called dieseling, which is like basically squirting a bit of oil up the back of the pellet, or rubbing some oil or Vaseline or something in it. That creates the same sort of thing as you get in the compression of a diesel engine. So it will basically create a small explosion as that oil comes under compression in the rear of the pellet, and it will actually fire the pellet out using that explosion as well as the air behind it. You will get a much higher velocity. It will go way over the legal limit, and it would also damage your gun. It will ruin all the gas seals on the gun, and it's obviously illegal. So I would strongly suggest people don't start doing stuff like that. The same goes for uprated spring kits and all these little bits and bobs you can get from China, or something that's tuning a pre-charged pneumatic to take the energy level up. That's going to cause you problems. If that gun gets looked at by the police, you're in serious trouble, because that rifle has now become a Section 1 firearm. And worse still, if you tune a pistol to be like that, there's nothing in law that allows you to have a pistol over 6 foot-pound, because that immediately becomes a pistol that there is no legal requirement for. You can't go for a pistol license that allows you to own one of those. So that immediately becomes a Section 5 article, and that is a serious offence. You're probably maybe looking at going to prison for that. You're certainly going to be in a lot of trouble. If you're a firearms certificate holder and you happen to have air rifles, well, like I said, it's entirely likely police are going to turn up and do a security check on you and have a look and see how your firearms are stored. They're going to have a look over your air pistols and air rifles as well if they see those. Another way people are falling foul is that you may not realise that you're actually legally obliged to keep your air guns securely stored if you have under 18s in your house. And that isn't just like your children that live in your house. It could be any children coming to your house. So if you have children accessing your house, like relatives, the neighbours' kids are coming around with the neighbours or whatever it is, then you are legally obliged to secure those guns in a storage cabinet. And the police are actively checking on that as well. So if they come around to check your secure storage and they notice you've got an air gun, leaning up in the corner, and then you also have children in your house, you're going to probably lose your firearms certificate or your shotgun certificate, or both if you've got both, because they're going to say that you're not a responsible person. And you've also broken the law, because that has been written into law now for quite some time. Then we deal with people that want to shoot their air rifles in their gardens or in their own land. That also comes with a few problems, especially these days. So if you're not overlooked and you can guarantee that none of the projectiles from that air gun are going to leave your land, not poking holes in the fence and going out the other side, or shooting up in the air and they're kind of, you missed the pigeon that was sat in the tree and then it goes into someone else's property, then you are breaking the law and you can get into serious trouble. And of course, if a pellet goes into someone else's property and goes through someone's window, they're very likely to call the police. They may not know it was an air rifle pellet. In fact, it's recently happened to friends of mine who had some, what they referred to as kind of bullet holes in their windows, and they were naturally very concerned about that. In all likelihood, that was air rifle pellets, but what are people like that going to do when they find these bullet holes through their windows? They're going to ring the police. It's a natural thing for them to do. Then the police are going to come and investigate. It's going to be fairly obvious where these pellets have come from, and they're going to come around your house and you're going to be in a lot of trouble. The other thing to take into account is how far you are from a public highway. So I believe it is 50 feet from the centre of a public highway. You cannot discharge an air gun at all. So if your garden is sort of next to a public highway and you've only got quite a small garden, there's not going to be enough room to get around that legality. So basically you're stuck there. You can't do that. You have to also bear in mind that even if you fall within all these parts of the law, so you've got a big garden, it's away from the public highway, and you know that you're not going to be losing pellets out of the garden in any way, you've got a great bullet trap there, and you know you're a very good shooter, you're not getting misses and kind of going through the fence or the hedge or anything like that. The other issue is being overlooked. You know, that could be overlooked by neighbours. It could mean that people can somehow see you shooting in your garden from a public walkway. That's going to be a big issue because a lot of people these days are very scared of anything that looks like a gun. They may not understand what you're doing, and again, their first port of call is going to be ring the police and say, oh my God, there's a maniac with a gun in the back garden, you know, he's shooting the gun. They don't know what guns sound like. They will just assume that you've got a really, you know, nasty rifle and that you're popping it off in the garden and that you're some kind of terrorist. And the next thing you know, armed response will be at your garden and they will be pointing guns at you. I personally wouldn't risk that. You know, even if I was on the right side of the law and like I said, everything was good in my garden, I personally would not risk having guns pointed at me by a firearms team just because I wanted to do an airgun hobby in the garden. So I would either do it in a garden that doesn't get overlooked, or if you get on well with all your neighbours, it would be a very good idea to go round to the neighbours' houses and say, look, my hobby is air rifle shooting. I do it perfectly legally in the back garden. Maybe take them round the legislation and show them the legislation that allows you to do that and say, I just want to let you know, and if you could let anyone else in your house know that I do this, because what I don't want is people getting freaked out and upset and ringing the police, and then I've got obviously lots of problems. If you have a good relationship with your neighbours and you can do that, then I would be thinking that's a pretty good way of getting around any issues. Now, there's also the issue of people going on land. If you've got permission to be on that land with an air rifle, you can do your target shooting on that land, as long as the projectiles don't leave the property. And you can also maybe hunt vermin on that land with an air rifle. But your problem is going to be if any projectiles stray off of that land, just like we've discussed in the garden, or worse still, if you stray off of that land or you don't get permission and you just go on some random farmland or you go on some public land, there is no facility in law for you to be doing that. You know, if you're walking around on public land with a rifle, you're going to be in massive trouble. Same with an air pistol. If you're walking around on someone's private land and they don't give you permission to do that, you're going to be in a lot of trouble. That's an offence in itself. Discharging these things in a public place or discharging them in a place where you don't have permission to do so is a big problem legally. It's also even a problem to have them out and about in public. So if you're transferring them from one place to another, you need to keep them sleeved up, because if you're walking around with something that scares everyone half to death, number one, you're probably going to have a police firearms team turn up and point guns at you, and number two, there's going to be some obvious legal ramifications that you're probably going to get charged with, you know, threatening behaviour or some such thing like that. And there'll be all kinds of people in the comments going, oh yeah, but I'm a sovereign citizen and that's only an act and blah blah blah. You know, that wasn't written into the original constitution in whenever, 1700 and whatever. Guys, that's all well and good. And if you want to spend, you know, years of your life arguing with people in court or sat in a prison cell, you know, writing a book on how you were technically right and the judge in court was technically wrong, and how it, you know, you're the best person at law or whatever. That's great for you, but most of us don't want to spend our lives living like that. I don't want to lose my job. I don't want to be sat in prison cells, and I don't want to have protracted legal arguments that are incredibly expensive when I don't have to. So I'm not going to advocate any of that nonsense. Like I say, if you guys want to do some kind of sovereign citizen rubbish, then crack on with it. But let's be honest, it doesn't go well for anyone. I've yet to see any successful sovereign citizens who have had, you know, completely free of aggravation. They don't have any problems with the law. They don't have any problems with the police, and all their sovereign citizen stuff just got them straight out, and, you know, everything was fine afterwards. That never happens. They always have a number of significant issues, because the powers that be are not going to let you win. It's that simple. You know, if there's laws that they've put in place, they're going to make sure that those laws are applied. And you arguing some weird protracted point about the you know, stuff that's historical almost, it's not going to go well for you. It's as simple as that. And I know that people are going to bleat on about that. A lot of these guys that do are keyboard warriors. They've never been to court in their lives. They've probably never broken the law, and they like to waffle on about it in comment sections on YouTube. And that's all well and good. But for those of us who actually have to deal with the police and deal with firearms certificates and the ownership of these things, and trying to be responsible and also do the responsible thing for the rest of the gun owners in this country, and kind of build a reasonable relationship with the authorities over it, having that kind of attitude really isn't going to help anyone. Guys, I hope you found that of some use. There's some basic stuff there to think about. I hope some of you know it already, but maybe some of you don't. And just bear in mind that this stuff is going to be really magnified. The police are going to be looking into this stuff now, because they are clearly taking any sort of gun ownership much more seriously after the 2021 episode. So just be aware, be responsible, and take as much precaution as you can. You know, even if you don't have children in the house, if you've got access to secure storage, it's not completely ridiculous to think to put your air rifles in there, leaving them sat out, loaded, you know, for no reason whatsoever. I've seen people do that kind of thing before, and I just, you know, it's irresponsible, basically. The police are never going to like that. There's no reason that anyone should do that. And all it would take, if you've got a dog or a wife or, you know, anything else in the house that kicks that over or bumps into it, or, you know, picks it up to look at it and it's loaded and it goes off, then you're never going to forgive yourself. It's just not worth it. So personally, I think it's a sensible idea to keep them locked away. And even if you don't lock them in a secure cabinet, I would at very least put them in a slip or put them in a, you know, a gun case and keep them in there, so people aren't going to just start fiddling about with them when you're not supervising them. Thanks a lot, guys. Have a great day. I'll catch you all soon.